What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast
with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and this week we'll take a look at these stories. The federal government has announced a 30% reduction in the number of foreign student visas it's going to grant for the next 2 years as part of a step to deal with Canada's housing crisis. But it also means a significant reduction in funds for all Canadian universities, one that may put some in a precarious position. Julia Scott from Universities Canada will explain.
And can we talk about how some people react to Taylor Swift rooting for her boyfriend Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs? Yeah, we spoke to a sports columnist who says the thin-skinned men triggered by Taylor Swift at games need to get a grip.
Ouch.
So, yeah, now that they're headed for the Super Bowl, we asked, is the pop star's presence ultimately good or bad for the sport? And something really incredible happened last week when Elmo, yes, the Muppet, Elmo asked the seemingly simple question on social media, how are you doing? And got bombarded with responses that showed really a whole lot of people aren't doing well at all. What could we learn from this? What should we learn, especially about our need to connect? An expert explains.
But we begin with the story of David Lametti. He served as Justice Minister in the Trudeau cabinet for 4.5 years, a position, by the way, he called his dream job, until it wasn't. David Lametti and the reason he chose to quit the Liberals and politics, coming up now. We learned yesterday afternoon, and I guess fair to say this is a pretty big story, surprising story. Former Justice Minister David Lametti resigning as a Liberal MP. He's going to be going into private practice with a law firm here in Montreal. And David Lametti is on the line right now. First of all, thank you so much for coming on with us. We appreciate the time today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Let me get to the big question. I read in the statement or part of the interview given to La Presse, you said that, this idea of leaving government and resigning as an MP, you made it with some sadness because you called it originally your dream job. So when you say with some sadness, why are you leaving then?
Well, obviously the situation's changed. As a jurist, I wanted to be Minister of Justice, and I was Minister of Justice for 4.5 years, Attorney General. It is, in addition to being, a great position around the cabinet table, I would argue for a jurist, it's the position around the cabinet table. I did my best every single day. I worked hard. I think I've got a great track record of accomplishment in that 4.5 years. I was left off cabinet the last time around, and look, that was a decision that came as a surprise to me. I appreciate that it is the Prime Minister's decision and it's his prerogative, and I accept that. I tried to find other ways to continue to serve, trying to find areas of interest and other ways to have an influence on policy. But I've been finding it difficult, I have to admit. And so I began to look at other opportunities, and I think this is a good time for me to move to a firm, a great firm, Faskin's, out of Montreal, but a national firm, into areas that are of abiding interest to me. So reconciliation on the ground, so UNDRIP, resource development projects, critical minerals, and complying with UNDRIP because they lie on First Nations land, and the whole tech, artificial intelligence, blockchain side of things, which I worked a lot with Mr. Baines, but I also did a fair bit when I was a law professor.
Well, congratulations on that new role. I suspect you have some guesses as to why you weren't given a cabinet position. Do you want to share any of those with us?
Well, I never really got any more than you got. So in the public sphere, I was told I got lost in a numbers game, and I understand that cabinet construction is about many factors. It's about many kinds of representation. I tell the story when I first got elected. Monique Jérôme-Forget told me that she created many cabinets with Jean Charest, and she said, "Mr. Lametti, you're good, but don't take it personally if you're not in cabinet. There are many other factors," and that guided me for many years, and I reminded myself of that this summer when it happened. There are a lot of factors. Proud of my record, not a question of my competence, and so I got lost in a numbers game. That's honestly
Okay.
the best I know. There have been people who've speculated for, this political reason or that political reason, helping other people who might be in more trouble electorally. Again, I don't know that any of that is true, and it might all be true.
Well, let me offer up then this speculation, because we had chatted at the time when the language law was being changed, or when Bill 96 had come out in Quebec. I remember we'd had you on a couple of times, and at the beginning, and I recall you talking about, the fact, or telling the Quebec government that the notwithstanding clause was never intended to be used in a preemptive manner. That got you in hot water in Quebec. François Legault came out and basically told you, it's none of your business. And then after that, I had the sense, and I think Natasha and I talked about this, we had the sense that the Prime Minister must have come to you and said, you know what, pull back, don't keep talking about this, because I know subsequently we didn't have you on very much to talk about this, and then a lot of people started wondering, why isn't the Justice Minister bringing this up? Is he being silenced by the PMO?
No, I don't think that's accurate. In the sense that I came out pretty strongly and said we were against it, and that we were going to pursue the court case when it got to the Supreme Court. And my successor, Minister Virani, is maintaining that line. And to be honest, I think that's the only line that can win, that has a chance of winning. And I still believe that in terms of legal strategy. I think the best possible way, perhaps the only possible way to win that case at the Supreme Court of Canada is to let that case run through the court system. And we've got a Superior Court decision. We're waiting for a Court of Appeal decision. People are talking about a reference. My view is that we would have lost a reference 2 years ago, because we're asking the Supreme Court to overturn its own precedent. So it takes changes on the ground, and for that to happen, you need a better court record. That's what I think we're getting. Hopefully, we have a chance of winning that. But I don't think so. I don't think that has. That had changed. I don't think it has changed, and I don't think it's the reason why I was left out. I was a strong voice for the English language community and the Allophone community around the cabinet table. I worked hard with Anthony Housefather to try to amend the parts of C-13 that I think symbolically were challenging. I don't particularly think they have a legal impact. The references to the Quebec language charter, I differ with Anthony on that, but I did work with him. My team worked with him to try to make those amendments in the House of Commons, and we failed because of the NDP. But but I don't think that's the factor either. I think we had a pretty good working group, and we served, I think, the English community well, and we had strong voices. And there will be other strong voices, I hope, now that I'm not at the table.
Yeah, but I would just add that as a Quebec MP, right, I wondered if your opinion, your comments, re-Bill 96 and the notwithstanding clause and the eventual challenge kind of roil the federal government or the PMO, because, the idea, of course, is never to upset Quebec too much, at least not the government in power. Did that ever come up, or would you have heard of that coming up?
Well, look, we always discuss relationships. I'm not going to say exactly what was said at Cabinet because I can't do that. But it's certainly, we discussed relations with Quebec as, in a variety of different groups, as MPs, Quebec caucus, as Cabinet ministers. And we, as we did with other provinces, there are other relationships out there too. I don't, to be honest, I don't believe that that's a factor of me having been left out of Cabinet. I will continue to advocate. I put up a Facebook post. I'm one of the people that came to McGill from somewhere else and ended up staying because I love this place. And I think what's happening with the Quebec universities is the Quebec Anglophone universities is a tragedy that's going to weaken the fabric of not just English-speaking parts of Quebec, but all parts of Quebec.
I'm imagining, how you're feeling today, and I'm thinking as you leave this role and step into your new role, you're at Fasken, you're probably taking stock a lot, and you mentioned that you're proud of your record. I find myself very curious, like as MP and as Justice Minister, what are you most proud of that you did in that time?
Well, as a Justice Minister, I'm really proud of UNDRIP. I think it will transform Canadian society. I'm really proud of a lot of the criminal justice reform that we brought in. Again, I think it will help in a number of different ways in just not just fighting racism, but also declogging the court system. And quite proud of the bill that's not done yet, which is the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is long overdue in Canada. We've had so many high-profile cases of people who've been wrongfully convicted. I promised David Milgaard I would get this done before I left office, before he died. Unfortunately, he died. And I'm hoping my successor gets it across the line. As an MP, I'm really proud of the work we've done with my constituents, and I'm proud of the apology that I helped craft to the families of Italian Canadians interned during the Second World War.
Mr. Lametti, we want to thank you for your time, also for your service. I mean, I guess you realize when you get a job like Justice Minister, not a lot of job security necessarily attached to it. So I'm not sure. Did you actually consider that after what happened with Jody Wilson-Raybould? Was that something that went through your mind?
You serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, and you get named, and your time ends, and you got to accept the good with the bad.
Would you have? I'm just curious. Whatever. Just would you have accepted if offered another portfolio? Would you have accepted to stay a cabinet position?
I think at the time the shuffle happened, to be honest, I was kind of expecting another cabinet position because I'd been Minister of Justice for 4.5 years. I'm with Anne McClellan, with the longest-serving Liberals, so I thought I would be changed. If you'd asked me a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I was pretty much set on or 2 months ago, I was pretty much set on my new route, and so I think nothing would have kept me at this stage. I've been working on this for a while, and I think I'm going to be happy.
Well, we wish you
said
luck.
You're smiling. Glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Glad
absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck. Hope we can speak to you again in the future.
Thanks to you both.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Can we talk about how some people react to Taylor Swift rooting for her boyfriend Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs? Yeah, we spoke to a sports columnist who says the thin-skinned men triggered by Taylor Swift at games need to get a grip.
Ouch.
So, yeah, now that they're headed for the Super Bowl, we asked, is the pop star's presence ultimately good or bad for the sport? If you don't know by now that Taylor Swift is dating Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs, you've been under a rock or something. And seeing her at his games is a given. You see her a lot, like a lot. Too much for some people. The camera kind of seems to be on her at all times. It's catching her every reaction to her boyfriend's game. And evidently, that bugs some people. It has irked some fans. Even people within the NFL have said it takes away from the on-field product and it distracts viewers from the game itself. If that's how you feel, if you're triggered by seeing too much of Taylor Swift at those games, our next guest says, get a grip. Nancy Armour is a USA Today sports columnist, and she joins us now. Thanks so much for your time, Nancy.
Sure. Nice to talk with you.
So you wrote this article last week, fresh off of Kansas City beating Buffalo. And I'm thinking now, the Super Bowl is coming. Things are only going to ramp up. Are you going to be ramping up your message that male fans need to suck it up?
Yeah, because it's, this whole notion that she has taken over is ridiculous. She has shown, the New York Times did a story late last week that she's shown for a grand total of 25 seconds over the course of a 3-hour game. I don't know how many shots we get of Andy Reid holding a plastic covered call sheet up to his face. I mean, it's not as if they're cutting away from the game and you've missed a touchdown catch because they're showing Taylor Swift. And the same people who get all bent out of shape about this love seeing Jim Harbaugh watching his brother or seeing Eminem in a game. It's a double standard, and it's just really stupid.
Yeah, or even Jason Kelce. Like, I was thinking about how there was such a positive reaction to him being supported by his brother, and yet not a positive reaction to him being supported by his own girlfriend. Is this just sexism?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I think it is any woman in sports can tell you that you always have to explain or justify your fandom in a way that men are never asked to do. And this is just an outgrowth of it. And it's also, the world has changed, and men are not automatically, given primacy. And that is threatening to some people. And they see this as yet one more example of their place in the world being threatened or them losing their place in the world. And, football has been seen as this male bastion, which is not really true. I mean, for the last decade, women have made up almost half of the NFL's fan base. And so it's, it's just holding her to a different standard, especially when she's not doing anything.
Yeah, sure.
This is the network and the league that's promoting her being there. Yeah. She's just going to watch her boyfriend play football.
Right, and because ultimately they benefit from her being there. Let's talk about the Taylor effect. I mean, she's had a huge impact. My 11-year-old daughter now watches football, right? And they're buying the merch, and this has been huge for the sport. What's the problem with that?
There's really nothing, except for if you're, a dad, Brad, or Chad who doesn't want women taking away your game. But no, for the NFL, this is a dream come true for them. Somebody brought up a really good point last week that Roger Goodell said it's been about 10 years ago that he wants the league to get to a place of a $25 billion revenue each year. That's an astronomical number. If anybody can do it, the NFL can. But what we've seen recently is it's almost an acknowledgement from the NFL that they've kind of reached, their peak with the U.S. market, that, they've got these massive TV contracts. They've got, sponsorship deals with sportswear companies, et cetera. They've now got gambling. So one of the places that they're looking at more, and we're seeing it, is the international market. They're putting games overseas. They went to Germany this year. They're going to Brazil next year. Well, all of a sudden they have been gifted this entirely new demographic, a fan demographic. And it's also in most cases, it's a younger demographic, which the NFL studies have shown struggles with, that kids aren't watching the NFL. They're certainly not watching it the way that their parents did. And so all of a sudden the NFL, which has thought, hey, maybe we've tapped out in the U.S., has this completely new, market, fan base, whatever you want to call it. It is a gift for them.
With reference to,
you should see Aaron's face through most of this.
As the resident man listening to this conversation, I will say, look, and I'm thinking most guys are like this. Yes, there's some people out there, and I think those people will always be there who are like, I don't want to see anything else. Just show me the coach. Like whether it's a guy holding a clipboard or whatever else, no need to see Taylor Swift. But I think to your point, and to Natasha's point as well, this is only good for the game. I don't care. The NFL doesn't care if you watch the game to see Taylor Swift or watch it to see a touchdown cast. They just want eyeballs. This brings eyeballs to the NFL. And maybe some of those people who would not have watched and are watching now, they become fans. They get hooked now. And then they start to, wow, I kind of dig this football thing. And they start to watch as well. To me, this is a win-win. So for anybody protesting the fact or really upset about the fact they're interrupting a football game for 5 seconds at a time by showing Taylor Swift hugging Patrick Mahomes' wife, they need to get a grip.
Well, it also, too, and I fully agree with everything that you're saying, they're not interrupting the game. I love American football. It's wonderful. It's my favorite sport. But there's a lot of dead time between plays.
Sure.
Yeah. So what? You're cutting away to see Taylor Swift in a box, or you're just going to instead of seeing a bunch of 300-pound guys standing around at the line of scrimmage. I mean, you're getting upset about that? Really?
Yeah.
Make it make sense.
And about when we're talking about entertainment, what is more entertaining in that moment? It is awesome to watch people's reactions, particularly if they happen to be the biggest pop stars in the world. Nancy, I'm wondering if you've been taking flack for this article. Like, what kind of response have you gotten from people?
It's been interesting, with the exception of, I got one email this morning, and I think I had one response on Twitter, came from women. Every other response that I've gotten, and I have gotten plenty, have been from men telling me that I am wrong, that I don't know what I'm talking about, which is not surprising.
Man. What is wrong with these men? Guys, come on.
And I'll say this, we find this in a lot of different cases, that if it is not your experience, your reality, it's not your right, it's not your place to tell those of us whose it is, how we should feel or how we should respond. So, the guys who are telling me I'm all wet and that there's, I just need to go back in the kitchen, you're kind of proving my point.
Oh, God. Well said. I'm so glad you wrote this article, and we are so appreciated that you took the time to talk to us today. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Good luck, Nancy.
Yeah, good luck.
We're not all like that. All right.
That's Nancy Armour. She's a USA Today sports columnist.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
The federal government has announced a 30% reduction in the number of foreign student visas it's going to grant for the next 2 years as part of a step to deal with Canada's housing crisis. But it also means a significant reduction in funds for all Canadian universities, one that may put some in a precarious position. Julia Scott from Universities Canada will explain. So you may remember last week, Mark Miller, our immigration minister, introducing a cap on foreign student visa applications. So universities across the country, depending, I guess, on the city you're in, the bigger the city, the more this is going to hurt if you're a university. All this to do something about what he had called an out-of-control situation in immigration. So it's going to be university students essentially paying the price to begin with. Well, now we're hearing from an organization that represents universities across this country, Universities Canada. Julia Scott is their Director of Programs and Partnerships and is on the line right now because you have penned a letter, if I understand correctly, to the minister with respect to this. What is this about? What do you want to see happen here?
Hi, Dean. Really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Our real concern here is the moratorium on processing new international student study permits. Because essentially what happened was Minister Miller announced on January 22nd what the new implementation of the policy would be, and there's a hold on any new permits that is coming in as of now. And due to that, it's really it really has a large impact on universities across the country. As you can imagine, this is the time for international student study permits to come in. We've estimated that somewhere between 15 and 20,000 permits come in between January and March. And the provinces are really grappling with how to come up with a system of provincial letter of attestation, and have been given no time to do so without any consultation as well.
I find, Julia, the thing that I wonder about right away is what we're dealing with here in Quebec already, which is the tuition hikes for international and out-of-province students. So is this like a compounded situation? How does that affect this?
I mean, it's unfortunate. It's a real sort of it's sent institutions and provinces into a real tailspin with a lot of issues happening simultaneously. And if we're looking at simply the contribution that comes from international students, it's a contribution of close to $22 billion a year to our country. And wow. These contributions are really vital in sustaining our local labor markets, in increasing diversity, and of also meeting the demands of high-growth sectors. So the policy that was announced last week, really, the impact extends far beyond institutions and will affect businesses and communities.
Was that decision by the immigration minister, was that done in consultation with universities?
It's our understanding that it was not done in consultation with universities or with the provinces. And I think this is the real challenge now, that provinces have been tasked with coming up with a system to implement letters of attestation. And outside of Quebec, there are no current systems wherein provinces are actually providing a letter of attestation to complete the study permit. So, you know, we're obviously urging the department not to impose the letter of attestation requirement until the provinces establish an effective process. And we're urging for urgent consultations with the sector to modify the CAP policy and clarify many, many outstanding questions and mitigating the negative impacts that will come.
So I want to be clear, Julia, in saying that I really understand where you're coming from, and that the economic impact of not having these students is absolutely huge and critical. However, I also see the perspective that if we don't have the infrastructure in place to take care of them properly, if we are in a housing crisis, if we cannot accommodate them appropriately or, comfortably, what should happen here? How do we deal with that problem while at the same time still having the students come in and contribute to our economy?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a really good question. I think what we have to be careful of here is not to put the blame on the housing crisis on international students. Mm-hmm. It's a systemic issue. It's been bubbling for a really long time. Universities are very diligent in ensuring that international students that are coming and they studying at our campuses across the country have the required supports they need. And part of those are ensuring that they have support for housing, whether it be on campus or off campus. And as much as, the financial aspect is important, Canada will be losing billions, and universities will need to make tough decisions on what that represents for the financial sustainability of our institutions.
I wonder, the number we heard originally, which was a 30%, then I understand, obviously, the larger the city, this could be 50% in some cities across this country. I guess Montreal, Toronto being two of those cities. Is there a drop-dead date for this? In other words, there's be time now for consultation. You're asking to have a chance to speak with the minister. When does this actually go into effect?
This went into effect the moment the announcement was made on January 22nd. So that's the real challenge here, is that there's a number of parties, institutions, the provinces that are really scrambling to put the letter of attestation into place. So essentially what we're advocating is a pause, is for consultations, is for us to ensure that that the requirements for college and undergraduate study permit applications can be held until at least the end of March, or at least until provinces are able to establish an effective process. Now,
I know we've discussed this on the show before. We know foreign students obviously pay more when they come here. The government says it's a bit of a cash cow for universities. Is there a possibility, from what you understand, that some universities, once this is in effect, and you said it's in effect now, could in fact, go bankrupt, fold?
I think at this point it's too early to speculate, because even the institutions themselves are trying to figure out what this represents. The real issue is the timeline. So as soon as the announcements were made, the caps were not delivered to the provinces, as far as we understand. We do understand that they have been delivered as early as last week and possibly towards the beginning of this week. And the provinces are just beginning to react. So, of course, at the same time, each institution is trying to better understand what this represents in terms of financial impact on their campuses.
I'm struggling to understand. Okay, so you in your letter to Immigration Minister Mark Miller, you've asked for a delay until March 31st. That's pretty darn soon, too. What would be achieved? Yeah.
It sure is. We are hoping, and we're working with the provinces, and each institution will be working with the province in which they're located to help move this forward. The Quebec, as I mentioned, has a letter of attestation, the CAQ letter, which is in the works and has been for quite a while now. We're not even clear on whether or not the Ministry of Education in Quebec whether this letter is actually a letter that can be used as a letter of attestation. We do understand from the federal government that it is admissible, but there are just so many questions that we have left unanswered at this point, trying to get clarity, and the situation changes every day. We learn more every day.
Oh boy.
Well, we wish you luck. And again, as you pointed out at the beginning, we forget sometimes in the context of this debate how much money these people actually bring to the economy. Never mind what they ask for from our government or from our people. But hopefully that's something the government will acknowledge, and you get your March 31st date. Thank you so much for the time this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
And something really incredible happened last week when Elmo, yes, the Muppet, Elmo asked the seemingly simple question on social media, "How are you doing?" and got bombarded with responses that showed really a whole lot of people aren't doing well at all. What could we learn from this? What should we learn, especially about our need to connect? An expert explains.
Something very, very interesting, bizarre, amazing happened on social media over the weekend. So on Friday, Elmo, as in, that Elmo from Sesame Street, puts up a post on social media. And what's interesting is not so much what happened when you just simply ask someone, as he did, "How are you doing?" That's it. That's how he asked. He asked the internet, "How are you doing?" And on the first part on Friday, he was getting pretty positive reactions, right? People were saying, "Hey, I'm okay. How are you?" That kind of a stuff. Pretty light. Elmo would always tweet back, or whatever social site they were on, "I'm okay. Elmo loves you." Stuff like that you'd expect from Elmo. But when Monday came around, things started becoming very, very differently. And it wasn't even a matter of a couple of good ones or bad ones. It turned rather dramatically, getting stuff like, "I'm broke. I got nowhere to sleep. I'm poor. I broke up." That kind of stuff. Basically, people not dumping on Elmo, but dumping their troubles, their woes on Elmo, right?
Telling their truth.
That's what it was. And it piled on and piled on and piled on to the point where there are now millions of views of that original post. Even Joe Biden, the U.S. president, weighed in yesterday because this became a thing, right? It had gone viral to say our friend Elmo is right. We have to be there for each other, offer our help, to a neighbor, and above all else, ask for help when we need it. And that's the key here, right? Because that's what comes up in situations like this. A cartoon character posts her, how you doing? And people who have no one else to turn to go to the internet, talk to Elmo for all intents and purposes, and let him know. So we thought this was a good story to bring home again, this, if you want to call it that, the scourge of loneliness that is just out there now and has been for a while. So Kiffer Card is an associate professor at Simon Fraser University and has weighed in on this subject before, is on the line right now. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, good to join you.
I call this a scourge. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but we're dealing with this. We're hearing more about it all the time. And I think the Elmo situation, and I know you're aware of that, just basically accentuates that even more. What was your reaction to this? What is your reaction?
Yeah, I think when we see a deluge of negative posts in reaction to this, I think it's first important to recognize that this isn't necessarily a representative sample. Certainly not everybody is suffering, from all these sorts of sources of distress, but that doesn't mean that this still isn't a crisis. Approximately 20% of Canadians encounter mental illness annually, and it is actually one of the most common risk factors for disability and unemployment in Canada. So this is a severe public health issue.
So given that it is, and given we know it is, and I know, for example, here at Bell, we have our Let's Talk Day, which happened a couple of weeks ago, and we address it at that time. Then, of course, the problem is it's a day, it's a week, and then we kind of forget about it until something like this comes along. And even with respect to it not necessarily, as you said, being representative, it's still an issue. You said it still affects so many people in so many different ways. What do we need to do that we're not doing?
Yeah, I think this is a critical component of this, is to just think that the way that we've structured our lives, living in small apartments, commuting in our, single-person cars, working in cubicles, the way we've structured our lives isn't very conducive for social connection. But yet, at our heart, what human beings are social animals. We rely on each other for emotion regulation. That's can say in our DNA. And so when you don't live in a way that your body needs you to live, we call that an evolutionary mismatch. And there's certainly this mismatch between the environments and communities we've constructed and what we actually need. And so I think we need to return to our roots and those things that everybody knows they need more of: more time with friends, more time with family, more face-to-face connection. Those are the things that we really need to make sure we're giving, because at our hearts, that's really what we need as human beings. And that was like mental health supports and structures provided through government and healthcare systems. But, at the end of the day, it's what we do to our well.
So I'm thinking about, I love what you said there, and that was what my takeaway. I'm like, there's actually, as troubling as some of the things are that were written there's something really beautiful in people coming together and finding a place to say what they need to say and seeking that connection. It speaks very loudly to me about our kind of collective state. And I love what you said, Kiffer, about how it's not everyone who's experiencing this, but a lot of people certainly are. And how are you doing has, or at least can, very quickly become a loaded question. So does this to you speak to the fragility of our collective state, or does it almost give you hope that we're having some of those conversations and saying the things we need to say?
Yeah, this is why I emphasize that not everybody's experiencing it, because regardless if you're experiencing it or not, this message is for you. That if you aren't experiencing a lot of distress, that means you're somebody who can help another person. We can't just put it all on an individual to solve all of their problems. We need to really come together and buoy people up. And I think, the internet gets a lot of bad rap, including in its role in creating loneliness and isolation as it does. But also lots of lonely people turn to the internet because it's low barrier, because they don't fear the judgments of people and communities they find online. Right. And so I think that's really right, that what we see on the internet is people coming together. But that might not be the best form of connection. In fact, we know that face-to-face connection is really what meets people's needs, and that digitally mediated connection is a less efficient form.
And yet that's become almost like a foreign concept. I mean, even just making a phone call now, everything's done by text. Like we've distanced ourselves as a society. So how do we, if you're stuck in that rut, how do you begin to change that behavior?
Yeah, I think this is the big challenge, is that technology in particular, the way we structure our lives, we haven't made those choices for no reason. We've made those choices because they're easier. It's easier to take your car rather than public transit. It's easier to put your earbuds in and walk down the street than talk to the people you pass by. It's easier to, text or call than it is to find a time to meet up. But I think there's something lost when we take the easy path, and really we all need to think about, okay, am I going to choose that easier option, or I'm going to choose the thing that I know I need? So it's just like, nutrition and exercise. Those are things that can be difficult for us to do, but we know that those are the most important determinants of our health. And social connection by far is among the most important determinants of how long you live, how healthy you are. And so it's really something that everybody needs to be making a priority in their lives. And I think it doesn't need to be monumental change all at once, but taking little steps along the way each day to think how you can be more connected.
I just want to mention in this Elmo situation that set up this entire conversation, it was so overwhelming that at one point, and remember, Elmo's trying to answer every post, which obviously after, so many is not possible. But depending on your tweet and depending on you saying, I'm not doing well, I'm having a rough time, eventually the account, the Sesame Street account, tweeted out mental health resources to people. Something perhaps they could not have gotten or would never have thought to have even looked for anywhere else, end up getting from a cartoon character from an account on Sesame Street, which to me is remarkable. But you're right, it doesn't necessarily replace that face-to-face connection. But the fact that it's at least offered to someone as an option, I thought was a huge step.
Yeah, and I think in Toronto, the Genwell Project, for example, is Canada's leading human connection movement. They're a national campaign funded by private charities aiming to really raise awareness of the things individuals can do to protect their mental and physical health through the power of social connection. So I think that these sorts of resources and systems in place are really critical. And I think you're right that a lot of times people don't know about it. And so even if you're feeling okay with your life, I think informing yourself about what these resources are, so that even if you're not capable of helping a friend in a certain way, at least directing them to resources is, last thing that you can do. So, I think that's really important. I think it's maybe important even more so to look at the scenario and remember that Elmo can't save us all, right? We really need to rely on each other and come together to save ourselves.
Which is kind of how he concluded. I'm speaking about Elmo when I say he, as if he's a person, but it ended by that they said, wow, Elmo's glad he asked. And Elmo learned that it's important to ask a friend how they are doing. That's such a simple takeaway, and yet it's kind of everything.
A lot of the times is, what we need to do is create vulnerability to share about ourselves with each other, so that we can really connect with each other. That's at the end of the day, what is going to create those sort of bonds where it makes it safe for us to share with each other these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's hard, and I think recognizing how hard that is.
Informative.
Interactive. And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and we will see you next week.
Have an excellent week.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.